My checking account went negative on a Tuesday, and the truck gave up on Wednesday. Same clicking sound it made back in Reno 2 years ago, only this time I didn't have the $200 for a new starter. That's how I ended up walking 3 miles down US 50 in the dark to start my first graveyard shift at a Shell station that also sold Subway sandwiches. The building sat by itself about 15 minutes outside Ely. Just the one structure with 4 pumps out front and a parking lot that was mostly dirt and some cracked asphalt. A streetlight buzzed over the far corner but didn't put out much. The rest was just sage and scrub going on forever under a sky so clear you could see the Milky Way without trying. I'd been inside maybe twice before, once for gas and once for a sandwich that I ate in the truck while trying to decide if I should drive back to Oregon or keep looking for work out here. The sandwich was fine. The guy working didn't say much. The mine laid me off 3 weeks ago. Budget cuts, they said. Restructuring. I was one of 47 people who walked out that Friday with a severance check that didn't even cover a full month of rent. I'd been a maintenance tech there for 2 years. Good work. Steady. Then it wasn't. I tried a few places in town first. A garage that wasn't hiring. A hardware store that said maybe in spring. The hotel on the main drag that took my application and never called back. Then I saw the help wanted sign in the Shell window and figured overnight couldn't be that bad. I'd done shift work at the mine. I didn't mind quiet. The interview lasted maybe 10 minutes. Sage Myers met me at a back booth in the Subway section with a clipboard and a pen that had the cap chewed up. He was a big guy, over 6 feet, with a gut that pressed against his tucked-in shirt and a way of looking at you that felt like he was calculating something. His hair was going gray in patches, and his face had that red color people get when they're mad a lot. He asked if I could work nights. I said yes. He asked if I had a problem with cleaning. I said no. He asked if I'd ever been written up for theft or tardiness. I said no to that too. He slid a W-4 across the table and told me to start Thursday at 10 p.m. Then he said Julia would train me and that he didn't tolerate shrink or excuses. I didn't know what shrink was, but I nodded anyway. That was it. I walked out with a job. Thursday came, and I got to the station at 9:45. My truck was still sitting dead in my apartment lot, so I walked it. Took about an hour. I didn't mind. The air was cold enough to keep me awake, and it gave me time to think about what bills I'd pay first, once I had a check coming in. Julia was inside when I pushed through the door. She was maybe 5'6", stocky, with sandy hair pulled back so tight it looked like it hurt. She wore the same shell polo and fleece jacket I'd seen on the day guy. She didn't smile when I came in, just looked at me and said, "You're early." Figured I should be. Good. She walked me through the basics fast. The register system was old but simple. Scan, total, cash, or card. If the card reader didn't work on the first try, wipe the strip on your shirt and run it again. Cigarettes were in the overhead cabinet, organized by brand. Menthols on the left, regulars on the right. Don't sell to anyone who looks under 30 without an ID. Sage would fire me for that. No warning. The coolers were in the back. Beer took up 3 doors. Soda and energy drinks took up 2. If someone asked for something we didn't have on the floor, we didn't have it. Don't go digging in the storage room. There wasn't time for that. Subway was the harder part. Julia walked me through the prep line, pointing at the cambros of lettuce and tomato and onion that were already set up. Meat went on first, then cheese if they wanted it. Then toasted, unless they said cold. Vegetables after. Sauce last. Wrap it tight or it falls apart. If I didn't know how to do something, she said, just do it anyway, and fix it next time. People didn't expect much from a gas station sandwich at midnight. She showed me how to clean the slicer and where the mop and bucket were. Bathroom key hung on a hook under the register. It was attached to a wooden block someone had painted bright orange so people wouldn't walk off with it. The block had restroom written on it in Sharpie. I asked her if it got busy at night. She said no. Maybe 10 people on a good shift. Trucks, mostly. Sometimes a couple driving through who didn't want to wait until morning for food. Sometimes nobody. Sage cares about the numbers, she said. Doesn't matter if it's busy or dead. He checks the register tape and the inventory sheet every morning. If something's off, he'll know. Got it. I mean it. He fired the last day guy for giving his buddy free fountain drinks. Wasn't even $20 over a month. Didn't matter. I told her I wasn't planning to steal anything. She just nodded, but her face didn't change. Like she'd heard that before and didn't buy it. At 10:30, she locked the front door and walked me to the back office. It was more of a closet. A desk with a busted chair, some filing cabinets, and a safe bolted to the floor in the corner. She knelt down and worked the dial. 3 turns one way, 2 turns back. The door swung open and I saw some cash bags, a few envelopes, and a laminated card about the size of a postcard. Julia pulled the card out and set it on the desk. "You need to read this," she said. I looked at it. The laminate was scratched up and the corners were rounded from handling. There was text printed on it in a plain font, numbered 1 through 6 or 7. I couldn't read it from where I stood. "What is it?" "Rules," she said, "for overnight. Like station rules? Different rules." She stood up and brushed off her knees. "The guy before you quit in the middle of a shift. Left his wallet in the mop sink and walked out to the highway. Didn't even clock out." I waited for her to say more, but she didn't. She just looked at the card and then at me. "Why?" "He didn't follow them," she said. "Read it, all of it. Don't skip anything." I picked up the card. It was heavier than I expected, like someone had glued 2 layers of plastic together. The text was typed, not handwritten, but some of the letters were faded. Julia was already heading for the door. I followed her back out to the front, still holding the card. "You'll be fine," she said, pulling her jacket tighter. "Just don't do anything stupid." "Like what?" She stopped at the door and looked back at me. Her face was tired. She'd probably been working here too long. I didn't know how long that was, but I could see it in the way she moved, like everything took a little more effort than it should. "Just read the card," she said. "Stick to it. If something feels wrong, it probably is." That bugged me a little. Not the words, just the way she said them. Flat and serious. Like she wasn't trying to scare me, just stating a fact. "Okay," I said. She nodded once and pushed through the door. I watched her walk to an old Chevy sedan parked under the streetlight. The engine turned over on the first try, and she pulled out onto the highway without looking back. Then it was just me. I stood there for a minute, listening to the hum of the coolers and the faint buzz from the fluorescent lights overhead. The subway prep line had a low mechanical sound, something in the refrigeration. Outside, the highway was empty. No headlights in either direction. Just darkness and the flat desert going on forever. I looked down at the card in my hand. The first rule was printed in bold at the top. "Do not acknowledge anyone at the window after 2 a.m. unless they enter through the front door." I read it again. Didn't make much more sense the second time. The rest followed underneath, numbered and single-spaced. If someone asks for directions to a place you've never heard of, say you're new and don't know. Do not guess. Do not offer your phone. No one is allowed behind the counter except you. If someone crosses without asking, leave through the back and call the number written on the safe door. If you hear knocking from the storage room, do not open it until morning. Restock from the front shelves only. Do not serve ice between midnight and 4 a.m. If a customer asks why, apologize and say the machine is broken. There were 2 more, one about the bathroom key and one about keeping the lights on in every part of the building, even the parts I wasn't using. No exceptions. I stood there reading it twice, then a third time. My first thought was that someone was messing with me. Maybe it was something Julia and the day crew did to new hires. A test to see if I'd take it seriously or laugh it off. Small-town hazing. But Julia's face hadn't looked like she was joking. And the way she'd pulled the card from the safe. Careful, like it mattered more than the cash bags sitting next to it. That didn't feel like a prank. I walked back to the office and looked at the safe door. There was a phone number written in marker on the metal, 10 digits with a Nevada area code. No name next to it, just the number. The guy before me had left his wallet in the mop sink. That part stuck with me. People don't leave their wallet behind unless something's really wrong. I thought about asking Julia for his name, maybe tracking him down to ask what happened. Then I realized I didn't have her number and didn't know where she lived. I went back to the front and set the card on the counter next to the register. The laminate caught the light and I could see scratches all over it, little grooves worn into the surface. Someone had been holding this thing a lot, reading it over and over. I told myself it didn't matter. Probably just weird local superstition or some lawsuit thing Sage cooked up to cover himself. Maybe someone had robbed the place a few years ago and now they had protocols. That made sense. More sense than rules about ice machines and knocking. But I couldn't shake the weight of it. The way Julia had looked at me. The fact that she'd said the last guy didn't follow the rules, and then he walked off the job in the middle of the night. I checked the time on the register. 10:48. The coolers hummed. The subway line clicked and whirred. Outside, the wind picked up a little, and I heard it push against the front windows. No cars, no lights except the street lamp and the dim glow from the pumps. I picked up the card again and read the first rule one more time. Julia's taillights disappeared down the highway, and that was it. Just me and the fluorescent hum and that laminated card sitting in my back pocket like a weight I couldn't forget about. I tried settling into what I figured would be routine. Wiped down the counter even though it was already clean. Checked the coffee pots. One regular, one decaf, both half full and probably sitting there since Julia's afternoon shift. I dumped them and started fresh pots because that seemed like something I should do. The Subway prep line looked fine. All the Cambros had lids. The tomatoes were cut thin and stacked neat. I didn't touch anything. A semi rolled through around 11:15. Guy came in for diesel on pump 3. Paid with a card at the pump, never came inside. I watched his taillights fade east on 50, and then it was quiet again. The rules kept sitting there in my head. Not like I was thinking about them exactly. More like they were just there, taking up space. Do not acknowledge anyone at the window after 2 a.m. Do not sell ice between 1 and 2 a.m. Keep the back corridor light off. I didn't know why those were rules. Julia said not to do stupid things and to trust when something felt wrong, but she didn't explain what made ice dangerous for 1 hour out of 24. I restocked the candy bars under the counter. Snickers on the left, Reese's next, then Kit Kats. My hands needed something to do. Around midnight, I made myself a sandwich. Turkey and Swiss, toasted, just lettuce and mustard. I ate it standing behind the register because I didn't know if I was allowed to sit in the back booth. Sage hadn't said, Julia hadn't mentioned it. The sandwich was fine. Bread was fresher than I expected. 12:41 a.m. I noticed the clock because I'd been checking it probably every 5 minutes since Julia left. Headlights swung off the highway into the lot, and my chest did that thing where it gets tight for no good reason. Just a customer. That's what I was here for. Dusty Ford F-150, dark blue, or maybe black under the streetlight. Couldn't tell the year, but it wasn't new. It pulled up close to the front door, not by the pumps. Driver's door opened. Guy got out. Medium height, work jacket, ball cap. He went around to the truck bed, and I lost sight of him for a second. When he came back into view, he was carrying 2 bags of ice, one in each arm. The big ones, 20-pound bags from the freezer out front. That was weird. Not impossible, but weird. The door chimed when he pushed it open with his shoulder. He walked straight to the counter and set both bags down. They hit the laminate with a solid thunk and started sweating immediately under the lights. "Just these," he said. I looked at him. Older than me, maybe mid-30s. Pale blue eyes. Face had that wind-chapped look people get out here. He wasn't smiling, but he wasn't unfriendly either. Just neutral. Waiting. "Sure," I said. I pulled the first bag closer and scanned the barcode. The register beeped. $3.49. I scanned the second bag. Another beep. The total flashed on the screen. $7.63 after tax. I looked up at the clock on the wall behind me. 12:43 a.m. My brain did the math before I really thought about it. 1 a.m. was 17 minutes away. Rule number 2 said don't sell ice between 1 and 2 a.m., not don't sell it after 1. Between. Which probably meant up to 1 a.m. was fine. Except he'd already taken the ice. He didn't grab it off the shelf or out of the freezer while he was inside. He pulled it from the outdoor freezer and brought it in, which meant he'd already decided he was buying it before he even walked through the door. I looked back at him. He was still waiting. Patient. "Can't sell you the ice," I said. His expression didn't change. "Why not?" "Store policy. You already rang it up." "Yeah, but I can void it." He tilted his head a little. Not aggressive, just considering. "What kind of policy?" "No ice sales between certain hours?" "It's 12:43. "I know." "So we're not between those hours yet." I didn't say anything. My hand was still on the first bag. The plastic was cold and slick with condensation. "Look," he said. His voice stayed calm, reasonable. "I grabbed it outside. It's already here. I'm happy to pay." "I can't sell it." "You scanned it." "I can void it." "Seems like a waste of both our time." I pulled both bags back toward my side of the counter. Not fast, just steady. "I'll put them back." He didn't move, didn't reach for the ice. He just stood there looking at me with those pale blue eyes, and something about the way he stood made it feel like he was waiting for me to realize I'd made a mistake. "This doesn't make sense," he said, still polite, still calm. "I picked it up already. It's melting. You're going to put it back, and it'll be half water by morning." "That's fine. Is it the time? Because you said between certain hours, but you won't tell me what hours." I didn't answer. "I can wait," he said. "If there's a window coming up where you can sell it, I'll wait. I'm not in a hurry." "You'd be waiting a while." "How long?" "Past 2. He blinked once, slow. 2 a.m. "Yeah, that's over an hour." "Yeah." He leaned forward a little. Not aggressive, just closing the space. "So let me buy it now. I already picked it up. It's sitting right here. The register already has it in the system. You just hit total and we're done." "Can't do it." "Why?" "I told you. Policy." "Whose policy?" I didn't know if I was supposed to say the rules or just store policy in general, so I just said management. "Sage?" I didn't like that he knew Sage's name. I mean, it made sense. Small station, guy probably stopped here before, but hearing him say it made my stomach tighten. "Yeah," I said. "Sage doesn't work nights." "Doesn't matter." "So how would he know?" I looked at him. Really looked. He hadn't raised his voice once, hadn't made a threat or even acted annoyed. But standing there, he felt like he was taking up more space than he should. Like the air in the store was a little thinner. "I'm not selling you the ice," I said. He stayed still for another few seconds. Then he nodded. Once. "All right." He turned and walked toward the door. Didn't say anything else. Didn't look back. The door chimed when he pushed it open. I watched him cross the lot to his truck. Watched him open the driver's door and climb in. The engine started. Headlights came on, and that's when I noticed. No sound. Not from the engine. That was running fine. Low rumble I could barely hear through the glass. But his boots, when he'd walked out, I hadn't heard them on the tile. I'd heard the door chime. I'd heard him push it open, but I hadn't heard his footsteps. The truck pulled out of the lot and turned west onto 50. Taillights faded into nothing. I stood there staring at the 2 bags of ice sweating on the counter. The register screen still showed the total, $7.63. The clock on the wall said 12:51, 9 minutes until 1 a.m. The ice wasn't just store policy. It wasn't about spoilage or liability or whatever normal reason you'd restrict a sale. The rules weren't suggestions, they were a test. And someone was already pushing. The payphone rang at 1:07, 2 sharp rings from the wall by the bathroom door. I'd walked past it maybe 4 times already that night without really looking at it. Old Bell model with the metal cord and those instructions nobody reads anymore printed on a sticker above the coin slot. I stared at it for a second, didn't move. It rang again. 2 more rings, then silence. I pulled the laminated card from my back pocket. Rule 3. If the payphone rings between 1 and 3 a.m., unplug it. Do not answer. Pretty clear. I walked over and crouched next to the phone. The cord ran down the wall and disappeared into a plastic clip mounted near the baseboard. I followed it to the plug. Standard outlet. I gripped the cord and yanked it free. The ringing started again immediately. Same 2-ring pattern, but muffled now, like it was coming from behind the drywall instead of from the phone itself. I stood there holding the unplugged cord in my hand, staring at the phone. The receiver wasn't moving. The whole unit was silent. But I could still hear the ringing, faint, hollow, coming from somewhere inside the wall. I dropped the cord and stepped back. The ringing stopped. I waited maybe 30 seconds, nothing. Just the cooler hum and the buzz from the fluorescent panel above the drink cases. I turned and walked back to the counter. Didn't look at the phone again. My hands felt cold. I rubbed them together and tried to focus on literally anything else. Busy work. That was the move. I grabbed the glass cleaner and a rag from under the counter and started wiping down the lottery display case, even though it didn't need it. Julia had already cleaned everything before she left. But I needed something to do with my hands that wasn't standing still and listening. The ice bags were still sitting on the counter where that guy left them. I'd moved them to the side after he drove off, but I hadn't put them back yet. They were mostly melted now. The plastic sagged in the middle and water pooled at the bottom of each bag. I carried them outside to the freezer and shoved them back in with the others. The night air was cold enough that my breath came out in clouds. The parking lot was empty. The highway too. No headlights in either direction. I went back inside and locked the door behind me. 1:12 on the wall clock. I walked a lap around the store, checked the subway prep line. All the Cambros still had their lids on. I opened the cooler and looked at the beer. Coors Light, Budweiser, some craft stuff I didn't recognize. I closed the door and moved to the soda section. Everything was stocked and faced forward. 1:15. I couldn't hear the phone anymore. Maybe it stopped. Or maybe the sound just faded back into the wall and I wasn't close enough to pick it up. I didn't go check. Around 1:20 I got hungry. Or I thought I was hungry. Probably I just wanted another task. I walked over to the hot dog roller near the register. The machine was still on from earlier. 3 dogs spinning slowly under the heat lamps. They'd been there since Julia's shift, probably. The skin was starting to split on one of them. I grabbed a pair of tongs from the little plastic cup next to the bun warmer and pulled one of the dogs off the roller. Put it in a bun. Added ketchup and mustard from the pump dispensers. Ate it standing behind the counter in maybe 6 bites. It tasted like salt and preservatives. I didn't care. 1:23. I wiped my hands on my jeans and looked around. The shelves along the far wall looked fine, but I walked over anyway. Chips, crackers, cookies. Everything lined up neat. I pulled a few bags forward so the labels faced out and the rows looked tighter. 1:28. I went back to the counter and pulled the laminated card out again. Read through the whole thing. Rule 1 about the window after 2 a.m. Rule 2 about the ice. Rule 3 about the phone, which I'd already followed. Rules 4 and 5. I read them twice, then a third time. The words started to blur together. just a checklist. Instructions I couldn't adjust or argue with. I flipped the card over. Nothing on the back, just blank laminate. I put it back in my pocket. 134. I needed to move, do something. I walked to the back office and stood in the doorway. The room smelled like old coffee and whatever cleaning spray Julia used on the desk. The chair was pushed in. The safe was closed. The desk had a computer monitor, a keyboard, a cup full of pens, and a legal pad with nothing written on it. I stepped inside and sat down in the chair. It rocked a little to the left. Broken, like Julia said. I pulled the keyboard toward me. It slid easier than I expected, and when it moved, I saw the edge of something underneath. A spiral notebook. The cheap kind with the cardboard cover. Black and white speckled pattern. I pulled it out and opened it. The first page had a name written at the top in blue ink. D. Kowalski. The previous overnight worker, I figured. The one who left mid-shift. The entries started normal. Dates and times written in the margin. Short notes next to them. Oct 12, 11 p.m., slow night. 2 customers, restocked chips. Oct 14, 12:30 a.m. Trucker bought coffee and a sandwich. Paid cash. No problems. Oct 18, 1:45 a.m. Couple came in, bought gas and Red Bull. She asked about a motel. Told them the one by the turnoff. Basic stuff. Shift logs, nothing weird. I flipped forward a few pages. The handwriting started getting messier. The notes got shorter. More abbreviations. Oct T21, 2:10 a.m. Lights flickered. Breaker? Oct 23, 1:30 a.m. P6 acting up again. OC 25, 2:48 a.m. P6 short, 0.07 cents. Nobody used it all night. P6, pump 6, probably. I kept reading. OCT 27, 2:35 a.m. Lights out for 4 seconds. Everything came back. Check breaker 3. OXT 29, 1:55 a.m. P6 short again. Idle 4 this time. Check tape twice. Can't find the gap. Nov 2, 3:12 a.m. Window. Followed R1. Didn't look. R1. Rule 1. The entries got shorter after that. More frantic. Less detail. Nov 4. P6 short. Always P6. Nov 6. Breaker 3. Nov 9. Lights. Check B3. The last few pages were almost unreadable. Just fragments. P6. B3. Don't forget. Window. R1. Don't. The final entry was dated November 12th. 4 days ago. Can't. Leaving. That was it. 2 words. Then blank pages. I sat there holding the notebook. My chest felt tight. This person had been tracking something, trying to figure it out. And whatever it was, it scared them enough to walk out in the middle of a shift and leave everything behind. I flipped back to the pages about Pump 6. The writer mentioned it maybe a dozen times. Always short by a few cents. Always at the end of the night. Even when nobody used it. That didn't make sense. Pumps don't just lose money on their own. There's a transaction or there isn't. If nobody used it, the total should match. I turned to the pages about Breaker 3. The writer kept circling back to it. Check B3. Breaker 3? B3, don't forget. Like it mattered. Like forgetting would be bad. I didn't know what Breaker 3 controlled. Probably the lights based on the notes about flickering, but I didn't know where the breaker box was. Julia hadn't shown me. The phone started ringing again. Muffled, distant, inside the wall. I closed the notebook and set it on the desk. My hands were shaking a little. I pressed them flat against the desktop until they stopped. The ringing kept going. Same 2-ring pattern. Over and over. I looked down at the notebook. At the scattered, desperate handwriting. At the dates that stretched across 3 weeks of someone slowly realizing something was wrong and not being able to stop it or explain it or fix it. The store had been dealing with this for a while. Whatever this was. It wasn't new, it wasn't random. The rules existed because someone had figured out what worked, what kept you safe. And someone else had tried to track the patterns, tried to understand it, and it hadn't helped. I sat there in the broken chair with the disconnected phone ringing in the walls and a notebook full of warnings I didn't totally understand yet, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was supposed to be next. I was still sitting in the office when the door chime sounded at 1:47 a.m. I stood fast enough that the chair rolled back and hit the filing cabinet. The phone had stopped ringing maybe 10 minutes earlier. I'd been reading Kowalski's notebook again, trying to figure out what Pump 6 had to do with Breaker 3, and whether I should go look for the breaker box now or wait until morning. The chime meant someone had come in. I walked out front. A woman stood just inside the door, maybe 5'4", slim build, wearing a hospital scrub top in teal with some kind of cartoon character printed on the chest pocket. Sneakers, hair pulled back messy. Her eyes were red-rimmed, puffy, and she was breathing fast through her mouth. "Hey," I said. She turned toward me. "I need directions." I walked closer to the counter. "Sure. Where you headed?" "Emergency room." She took a step forward, hands clenched at her sides. "Nearest one. Do you know where that is?" "Ely," I said. "Back west on 50, maybe 12 or 13 minutes. There's a hospital on the north side. You'll see signs when you get into town." She nodded fast 3 or 4 times. Okay. Thank you." Her voice was tight, breathy, panicked. "My passenger's having trouble breathing. I didn't know if there was something closer." "No, Ely's it." I came around the counter. "You need me to call an ambulance? I can..." No, I just need to get there." She turned back toward the door. That's when I noticed. No keys in her hands, no purse, no phone visible in her pockets or clipped to her waistband. The scrub top had one of those chest pockets, but it was flat, empty. And outside through the glass door, the parking lot was empty. No car at the pumps, no car by the door. Just cracked asphalt and dirt under the one working streetlight in the far corner. I stopped walking. "Where's your car?" She didn't answer. She was already at the door. The automatic doors slid open, but the timing was wrong. They started moving before she got close enough to trigger the sensor. I'd been watching those doors all night. They opened when you stepped on the black mat about 3 feet in front of them. She was still 4 or 5 feet back when they started sliding apart, smooth and quiet, and she walked through without breaking stride. The doors closed behind her. I stood there holding the edge of the counter. She crossed the lot. I could see her through the window, walking fast toward the left side where the parking stalls were painted on the asphalt. Most of the paint had faded or cracked away, but you could still see the lines if you knew where to look. She reached the third stall from the left and stopped. Then she stepped forward into the empty space, and she was gone. Just gone. Not like she walked out of my line of sight. Not like she got into a car I couldn't see from this angle. She took one step, and she wasn't there anymore. It looked exactly like when a video skips a frame. 1 second she was mid-step. The next second the lot was empty and I was staring at cracked asphalt under dim yellow light. I didn't move for probably 30 seconds. Then I turned and walked fast to the back office, grabbed the monitor on the desk, and tilted it toward me. 4 camera feeds, black and white, each one showing a different angle. Front lot, side lot, pumps, interior. I rewound the feed, found the timestamp at 1:47 a.m. The interior feed showed me standing behind the counter. The woman walked in through the doors. We talked. I came around the counter. She turned and left. I switched to the front lot feed. She walked out, crossed the pavement, reached the third stall, stepped forward. Gone. The frame didn't skip on the recording. It was smooth, continuous. She just stopped existing in the middle of a step. I sat down in the broken chair and it rocked left under me. My phone was in my front pocket. I pulled it out, unlocked it, and opened my contacts. Julia's number was third from the top. I'd added it after the interview when Sage told me she'd be training me. I tapped her name, held the phone to my ear. One ring, two rings, then a crackling sound, sharp and staticky, and the call dropped. The screen showed 1 bar of service in the top corner. That wasn't right. I'd had 3 bars earlier when I checked the time around midnight. I tried again. Same thing. 2 rings, static, dropped call. A notification slid down from the top of the screen while I was staring at Julia's contact info. Severe weather alert. Lincoln County. I tapped it. The alert expanded into a block of text warning about high winds and possible road closures in effect until 6 a.m. for Lincoln County, Nevada. It listed highway numbers I didn't recognize and told travelers to avoid unnecessary trips. Lincoln County was 2 counties south of here. I was in White Pine County. Had been for 2 years. The mine was in White Pine. Ely was in White Pine. This station was 15 minutes outside Ely on US 50, still in White Pine. I closed the alert and opened my weather app. It loaded for a few seconds, then displayed a map centered on a town called Caliente that I'd never heard of. The location pin at the top of the screen read, "Current location, Caliente, NV." I was not in Caliente. I'd walked here from my apartment, 3 miles down 50. I knew this route. I knew exactly where I was. I closed the app, opened it again. Same thing. Caliente, Lincoln County. I set the phone face down on the desk. My hands were shaking again. I pressed them flat against my jeans and took a breath that didn't go deep enough. The woman had asked for directions. She'd said her passenger was struggling to breathe. She'd been wearing a hospital scrub top and sneakers like she worked in a medical building somewhere, and her eyes were red from crying or panic or exhaustion. Everything about her seemed real. Except she didn't have a car. Except she disappeared. Except the doors opened too early. I pulled the laminated card out of my back pocket and read through the rules again. Rule 1. Don't acknowledge anyone at the window after 2 a.m. unless they enter through the front door. Rule 2. Don't sell ice between 1 and 2 a.m. Rule 3. If the payphone rings between 1 and 3 a.m., unplug it and don't answer. Nothing about women in scrubs asking for directions. Nothing about people disappearing in the parking lot. Nothing about what to do when your phone thinks you're 100 miles south of where you're standing. I checked the time on the monitor. 2:14 a.m. I stood up, walked out front, and looked through the windows at the lot. Empty. The streetlight in the far corner was still working. The highway beyond the lot was dark in both directions. No headlights, no taillights, no sound except the cooler hum and the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. I walked a lap around the store, checked the subway prep line, opened the beer cooler and closed it, straightened a row of chips that didn't need straightening, went back to the counter and stood there watching the clock on the register. 2:17 a.m., 2:23 a.m., 2:28 a.m. At 2:31 a.m., I looked at the security monitor again. 4 feeds. Interior showed me standing at the counter. Side lot was empty. Front lot was empty except for the streetlight throwing its yellow circle onto the cracked asphalt. Pumps. The canopy lights over the pumps were dimmer than they'd been earlier. I didn't know if that was the camera or if the lights themselves had changed. Pump 6 was on the far right, the one Kowalski kept writing about in the notebook. There was something standing next to it. A figure. Person-shaped but wrong. The camera feed was black and white and grainy, but I could see it wasn't standing steady. It swayed or flickered, or both. Like the image couldn't decide where the edges were. I stared at the monitor. The figure didn't move toward the building, didn't move away. Just stood there beside Pump 6, shifting in place, unstable. My throat went tight. Rule 1. Do not acknowledge anyone at the window after 2 a.m. unless they enter through the front door. I looked up from the monitor toward the windows at the front of the store. The pumps were visible through the glass, lit by the canopy lights. I could see Pump 6 on the far right. I couldn't see anyone standing there. Just the pump. just empty pavement. I looked back at the monitor. Still there, still swaying beside pump 6 on the feed. I stepped back from the counter. My boot heel caught on something and I stumbled, caught myself on the edge of the register. Don't acknowledge it. I turned away from the monitor, walked to the subway prep line and stood there staring at the Cambros with their lids on, the neat stacks of napkins, the squeeze bottles of mayo and mustard lined up in a row. My heart was punching against my ribs. The figure was on the camera. It wasn't at the window. It was outside by the pump. Rule 1 said don't acknowledge anyone at the window after 2 a.m. This wasn't the window. This was the pump. But Kowalski had written about pump 6 over and over. Something was wrong with it. Something that didn't make sense, that cost a few cents every night even when nobody used it. I kept my back to the monitor. The cooler hummed. The lights buzzed. I stayed at the prep line and didn't turn around. I stayed where I was. Didn't look at the monitor again. Didn't check the window. The rule said not to acknowledge anyone at the window after 2 a.m. unless they came through the front door. And whatever was standing at pump 6 wasn't coming through any door I could see. So I treated it the same way I'd treat a wasp in the room. Ignored it. Kept busy. I wiped down the subway counter even though it was already clean. Checked the napkin dispensers. Straightened the salt and pepper shakers that didn't need straightening. My hands needed something to do and the work kept my eyes forward, away from the windows and away from the monitor behind me. The cooler hummed. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Normal sounds. I focused on those. Then the phone started ringing again. Not the normal ring this time, shorter, sharper. 2 quick bursts, pause, 2 more bursts. It sounded deliberate, rhythmic, not random at all. More like someone tapping out a pattern with their knuckles on a table. I turned around. The phone was still unplugged. The cord lay on the floor where I'd left it, the plug sitting useless on the tile about 3 feet from the outlet. But the ringing kept going. Tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap. Pause. Coming from inside the wall again, same as before. I stood there listening to it for maybe 30 seconds. It didn't stop. Didn't change. Just kept that same pattern over and over. And the longer I listened, the more it felt like it was waiting for me to do something. Respond somehow. I figured if I couldn't stop it, I could at least kill the sound. Make it harder to hear. The mop closet was just past the bathroom, a narrow door I'd seen Julia open earlier when she showed me where the cleaning supplies were kept. Small space, concrete floor. If I shoved the phone in there and shut the door, maybe the ringing would muffle enough that I could think straight. I walked toward the phone, got within maybe 5 feet. The ringing stopped, just like that, clean cutoff. No fade, no final tap. 1 second it was there, the next it wasn't. I stopped walking, stared at the phone unit hanging on the wall. The receiver sat in its cradle, motionless. The metal cord coiled down from it, still and ordinary. Nothing about it looked wrong. Nothing moved. Then I heard the voice. It came from the receiver. Quiet, but clear. A man's voice, low and familiar in a way that made my stomach drop before my brain caught up. "Harrison." I didn't move. "Harrison, you there?" The voice paused like it was waiting for an answer. I didn't give one. Couldn't. My throat had locked up. "It's Tim. I'm out on 50. Truck broke down about 2 miles east of you. Could really use a hand, man." My hands went cold. Actually cold, like I'd stuck them in the ice freezer. Tim, my brother, older by 5 years, died in a rollover outside Winnemucca when I was 23, wasn't wearing his seatbelt. Went through the windshield and hit the pavement doing 60. Closed casket. I'd carried one side of it with my dad and 2 of Tim's friends from the mine. That was 5 years ago. "I know it's late," the voice continued, still coming from the receiver even though the phone wasn't plugged in, even though the cord was sitting dead on the floor. "But I'm stuck out here. No cell service. Saw your lights from the road. Figured you could help me out." The voice sounded exactly like him. Same cadence. Same slight rasp he'd always had, like he'd just finished a cigarette. Same way he said my name, clipped and casual. I didn't move toward the phone, didn't touch it. Every part of me knew this was wrong, knew it couldn't be Tim, knew it was something else wearing his voice like a coat. But hearing it still hurt. "Come on, Harrison. It's cold out here." I crouched down fast, grabbed the unplugged cord, and yanked it further from the outlet. Not that it mattered. The thing wasn't using electricity, but I needed to do something, needed my hands to move, needed to act instead of just standing there frozen while my dead brother's voice asked me for help that I couldn't give 5 years ago and sure as hell couldn't give now. I grabbed the phone unit with both hands and pulled. It was bolted to the wall, but the bolts were old. The wall was just drywall, and when I wrenched hard enough, the whole thing tore free, bracket and all. The receiver clattered against the wall, swinging on its metal cord. I dragged the whole unit across the floor toward the mop closet. It scraped loud against the tile. The receiver kept swinging. The voice kept talking. "Just come outside. I'm right down the road. You'll see the truck." I didn't answer. Got the closet door open one-handed, shoved the phone inside onto the concrete floor next to a yellow mop bucket and a jug of industrial cleaner. Slammed the door shut. The voice cut off mid-sentence. I stepped back. Listened. Silence. I wiped my palms on my jeans. They were sweating. My heart was going too fast. I turned away from the closet and walked back toward the counter, forcing my legs to move steady, even though they wanted to shake. Then I heard it again. Not from the closet, from above. The overhead speakers crackled to life. The ones mounted in the ceiling corners that usually played the same 6 classic rock songs on a loop during the day. Julia had turned them off before she left, and I hadn't touched the controls. "Harrison." Tim's voice. Same tone, same inflection, coming from the front right speaker near the lottery display. "You're not listening. I need you to come outside." I kept walking, didn't look up, got behind the counter and gripped the edge hard enough that my knuckles went white. The voice shifted. Now it was coming from the soda fountain, the Coke spout on the left side. "I'm your brother. You'd really leave me out there?" Then it moved again. The freezer fans kicked on with a low mechanical hum, and the voice came through them, rattling and distorted, but still recognizable. "Just step outside, just for a minute." It was cycling, testing, trying different channels like it was searching for the one that would work, the one that would get me to respond, to acknowledge it, to do whatever it wanted me to do. I pulled the laminated card from my back pocket and read Rule 1 again, even though I had it memorized by now. Do not acknowledge anyone at the window after 2 a.m. unless they enter through the front door. This wasn't the window, but it was the same idea. Something outside trying to get in, trying to make me come out. And the rules said don't acknowledge, don't respond, don't give it anything. I shoved the card back in my pocket. The voice kept moving. Speakers, fountain, fans. Back to the speakers. It cycled through them twice more, the words changing slightly each time, asking, pleading, getting frustrated. Then it stopped. 2:53 a.m., according to the register clock. I stood there breathing too fast, listening to the silence, waiting for it to start again. It didn't. 1 minute passed, then another. The cooler hummed. The lights buzzed. Normal sounds. The building settled back into itself. I was just starting to relax when I heard the click. Sharp, metallic, from the subway section. I turned. The conveyor oven was on. The belt was moving, rolling slowly through the empty heating chamber. The red power light glowed on the control panel. I hadn't touched it, hadn't gone near it since I'd straightened the cambros an hour ago. The heat climbed fast. I could feel it from where I stood 10 feet away, a dry baking warmth that pushed into the cooler air of the main store. The conveyor kept running, nothing on it, just the black belt cycling through over and over. Then the smell hit. Not food, not bread or cheese or any of the sandwich ingredients sitting in their Cambros. Something sharper, chemical almost, like burnt plastic or singed wiring. It climbed up into my nose and throat and made me want to cough. 2:54 a.m. I stared at the oven, at the empty belt rolling through the heat, at the control panel with its glowing light. And I remembered Kowalski's notebook, the repeated warnings. Check B3. Don't forget B3. Breaker 3. The oven wasn't supposed to be on. The phone wasn't supposed to ring when it was unplugged. Pump 6 wasn't supposed to be short at the end of every night when nobody used it. But they were. And Kowalski had tried to track it, tried to understand it. And whatever he'd figured out had been enough to make him walk away mid-shift and leave his wallet in the mop sink. The smell got worse, stronger. The oven kept running. I couldn't ignore this one. I walked toward the back hall. My boots sounded loud on the tile. The chemical smell from the oven kept getting worse, and the heat was pushing out from the subway section like a wave. I passed the bathroom with the orange wooden key block still hanging on its hook, and kept going to the narrow hallway that led to the storage room and loading dock. The breaker panel was mounted on the right wall about halfway down. Gray metal door, no bigger than a pizza box. Julia hadn't shown me this part during training, but I'd worked maintenance at the mine for 2 years. I knew what a breaker panel looked like. I pulled the door open. Inside were 2 rows of black switches labeled with faded white tape. Most of the labels were impossible to read. Third one down on the left said B3 in blue pen, written over the old tape in handwriting that didn't match anything else. Probably Kowalski's. I flipped it down. The oven shut off immediately. I heard the belt stop moving and the heating elements click as they started cooling. But the overhead lights flickered at the same time. Not a quick blink. A slow dim like someone was turning a dial down and then back up. It lasted maybe 3 seconds. When they came back to full brightness, they felt harsher, colder. I walked back to the front and checked the security monitor behind the counter. The screen had gone gray when the lights flickered. Now it was back, but the feeds looked washed out, grainy. The timestamp in the corner read 2:59 a.m. I looked at the pump feed. Pump 6 was closer to the building. Not by much, maybe 10 feet. But it had been on the far right of the frame before, and now it was more centered. The figure was gone from beside it. I checked the front lot feed. The figure stood at the front door, just standing there, hands pressed flat against the glass. I couldn't make out details on the monitor, but I could see the shape. Human height, human outline. But the hands looked wrong. The fingers were too long, or bent at angles that didn't match knuckles. I looked up from the monitor toward the actual front door. The figure was there, pressed against the glass exactly like the feed showed, hands flat, fingers bent wrong. I could see them clearly now under the fluorescent light. The joints were broken, not cut or torn, just bent backward at the middle knuckle like someone had folded them the wrong direction and they'd stayed that way. The motion sensor didn't trigger. The doors stayed closed. I stood there watching it watch me. It didn't move, didn't blink. I wasn't sure it had eyes. The face was blurred, smudged, like someone had rubbed out a pencil drawing before it dried. Then I heard 3 sharp knocks from the back hall. I turned. The sound came from the employee restroom, the one that stayed locked, the one Julia never mentioned and I'd never opened because there was a public restroom for customers and I figured the employee one was Sage's or broken or something I didn't need to worry about. 3 knocks, precise, evenly spaced. Then pounding. Not knocking anymore, pounding. Flat palms slamming against the inside of the door in a rhythm that was too fast. Underneath the pounding I heard scratching, nails dragging across tile, long, slow drags that made my teeth hurt. I looked back at the front door. The figure was still there, hands still pressed to the glass. I walked to the front door and turned the lock. The deadbolt slid into place with a solid click. Then I locked the second lock, the handle set. Julia had shown me those during training. Locked them both at 2 a.m. I'd forgotten. The pounding got louder. I went back to the counter and looked around for something I was supposed to do. Some step I'd missed. The laminated card was in my back pocket, but I already knew what it said. I'd read it 10 times. Then I remembered the weather radio. Julia had pointed it out during the walkthrough. Black plastic unit sitting on the shelf under the register next to the carton of receipt tape. No AA logo on the front. She said it was required to stay on during overnight shifts in case of road closures or evacuations. I'd turned it off around 11 because the static was annoying and nobody was on the highway anyway. I pulled it out and switched it on. Static for 3 seconds. Then a clean, automated voice. The National Weather Service has issued a severe wind warning for White Pine County until 6 a.m. Hazardous travel conditions expected on US 50 east of Ely. Motorists should avoid unnecessary travel. I checked the wall clock. 3:02 a.m. The radio kept going. Current time stamp 0304. Repeat, 0304. 2 minutes ahead. The automated voice cut off. Static returned, then voices. Multiple voices, overlapping, some male, some female, different tones and pitches, but all speaking at once so I couldn't make out individual words. Just a wash of sound that almost made sense, almost formed sentences. Then one voice, separated from the rest. Clear, flat, no accent. The barrier is failing. Interruption at anchor 3. Replacement feeding cycle required. Another voice. Higher, strained. He cut the power. He stopped it. The agreement is void. A third voice. Wet, slow. Replacement, immediate, or the threshold collapses. I stood there holding the radio. The words didn't make sense, but I understood them anyway. The oven wasn't broken. It was running because it was supposed to. The phone rang unplugged because something was pushing through. Pump 6 was short every night because something was taking. The rules weren't protecting me from random bad luck or weird customers. They were feeding something, keeping it satisfied, keeping it on the other side. And I'd just interrupted the meal. The pounding from the restroom got worse, faster. The door was shaking in its frame. I heard the wood creak. The scratching underneath sounded like it was coming from multiple sources now. Not just nails. Something else. Something dragging wet across the tile. I looked at the front door. The glass was trembling. Not shaking. Trembling. Like a guitar string right after you pluck it. The figure's hands were still pressed flat, but now I could see the glass bowing inward under the pressure. Just slightly. Just enough to catch the light wrong. I turned and ran to the back office. The safe was still closed. I dropped to my knees in front of it and tried to remember the combination Julia had used. 3 turns right. No, 3 turns one direction. 2 turns back. I spun the dial. My hands were shaking. I tried 3 times and it didn't open. I stood up and checked the desk. Pulled open the drawer. Pens, rubber bands, a stapler. Old napkins from somewhere else. A folded gas station map. I checked the filing cabinet. Locked. I looked around the tiny office and saw it. A red label on the wall beside the door frame. Faded, peeling at one corner. It said, Beacon, in block letters with a serial number underneath. Below the label was a small metal panel about the size of a light switch cover. I pried it open with my thumbnail. Inside was a switch protected by a red safety cap, the kind you flip up before you can access the switch itself. I flipped the cap up. I pulled the switch down. Every light in the building went out, not the breaker panel. This was everything. Total darkness, except for the 2 exit signs over the front door and the loading dock. They glowed red and barely reached past their own frames. The radio was still on. I could hear it from the front counter. It wasn't static anymore. It was blaring. A loud, piercing tone, then a robotic voice reading numbers. Location code 7749, corridor anchor 3. Bypass protocol engaged. Warning. Do not approach mirrors. Do not approach reflective glass. Do not make eye contact with windows or standing water. The pounding from the restroom stopped. I stood in the dark office trying to breathe. Outside, I heard the canopy lights over the pumps doing something. A sharp electric buzz, then another, strobing, flashing on and off in a pattern that threw wild shadows through the front windows into the store. Then they held steady, brighter than before. Bright enough that I could see the front counter clearly even with the interior lights dead. I walked toward the front. The monitor was off. No feeds, just a black screen. I looked out the window toward the pumps. Pump 6 was flickering, not the lights. The pump itself, the whole unit, solid 1 second, faded the next, like a bad photocopy. The figure was still at the door, but now it was jerking, pulled backward. Its hands slid off the glass and it staggered toward the parking lot. It moved wrong, joints bending in places that shouldn't bend. Then something dragged it, fast, across the pavement toward Pump 6. It didn't walk. It slid, like someone was reeling it in on a rope. When it reached the pump, it snapped back into the flicker and disappeared. I waited. The restroom door wasn't pounding. The wet smell I'd started noticing was gone. The payphone was silent. Then I heard engines. 2 vehicles pulled into the lot, big SUVs, white with Nevada Highway Patrol markings and light bars on top. Behind them came a white box truck, unmarked, no logo. They parked in a line facing the pumps, headlights on, light bars flashing red and blue. A man got out of the first SUV, tall, crew cut, patrol uniform with a vest and duty belt. He walked to the front door and knocked twice, calm, professional. Harrison Stark? I didn't answer. I just stood there. I'm Trooper Mickey Buck, Nevada Highway Patrol. We're here on corridor detail. I need you to stay behind the counter and keep the front door locked. Do not come outside until I tell you. Understood? I found my voice. Understood. A second trooper got out of the other SUV. Woman, shorter, ponytail. She took a position near the corner of the building with one hand on her belt. 2 more people climbed out of the box truck. A man and a woman, both wearing dark clothing, not uniforms, utility gear. They opened the back of the truck and started unloading equipment. The man pulled out a tripod with something mounted on top. Not a camera, something else. A black cylinder with a dish on one end. He set it up 20 feet from Pump 6 and aimed it. The woman carried a large flat panel, matte black. She positioned it between the pump and the windows, angling it like a shield. The air around Pump 6 started to shimmer. Not heat shimmer. Something else. The space looked thicker. The man adjusted the tripod device and the shimmer intensified. Pump 6 flickered again. Harder this time. Something thrashed inside the flicker. I couldn't see it clearly, but I could see movement. Twisting. Stretching. It pulled thin like taffy and then snapped back toward the pump and collapsed into nothing. The shimmer faded. The restroom door in the back hall went completely silent. The wet smell was gone. The payphone didn't make a sound. Trooper Buck looked toward the window and nodded at me. Then he unlocked the front door with a key I didn't know existed and stepped inside. "You can talk now," he said. I stayed behind the counter. What the hell was that? Corridor breach happens when the feeding cycle gets interrupted. He looked around the store, checked the dark lights, the dead monitor. "You hit the beacon?" "Yeah." "Good. That bought us time." He pulled a small notepad from his vest. "I need to know which rules you followed tonight and which ones you almost broke. Quick version." I told him. The ice, the phone, the oven, the beacon. He wrote it down. "You refused the ice sale before 1 a.m.? 12:43. Customer pushback?" Yeah. He wanted to wait until after 2, but he left. Yeah. Buck nodded. That was a test. You passed. He flipped a page. You unplugged the phone when it rang? Yeah, it kept ringing anyway. Then it used my brother's voice. His pen stopped. He looked up. Used a voice you recognized? My brother. He's dead. 5 years. Buck's expression didn't change, but he underlined something in the notepad. And you still didn't answer? No. Good. He kept writing. The oven. You shut it off at breaker 3. It was burning. Smelled like plastic. It wasn't burning, it was feeding. You interrupted it. That's what triggered the breach. He said it like he was explaining a cash register error. Calm. Factual. I didn't say anything. Then you hit the beacon, and we got the alert. We were 10 minutes out. You did fine. Outside, the woman and man were packing up the tripod and the shield. The other trooper was walking a slow circle around Pump 6 with a handheld device I couldn't identify. Buck put the notepad away. We're going to finish cleanup. Stay inside. Don't touch breaker 3 until Julia resets the cycle tomorrow. What happens if I do? Same thing that just happened, except we might not get here in time. They worked for another 20 minutes. I sat on the floor behind the counter and watched through the window. They did something to Pump 6 I couldn't follow. Lights. Instruments. At one point, the man sprayed something on the pump casing and it glowed faint blue for a few seconds before fading. By the time they finished, the sky was starting to lighten, not sunrise, just the edge of it. That flat gray that means dawn is coming. Buck came back inside. You're clear. Barrier's holding again. Pump 6 is stable. For how long? Until it isn't. He looked at me. You're going to want to quit. Most people do after their first beacon pull. But if you walk away, this doesn't close. It just moves. Finds another low-traffic anchor point. Could be a rest stop. Could be someone's house. Closing the station doesn't fix it. Someone has to hold the line when the rules fail. That's the job. That's part of it. He left. The SUVs and the truck pulled out onto the highway and drove west toward Ely. The canopy lights over the pumps looked normal again. Pump 6 looked like every other pump. I sat behind the counter until 6:10 a.m. Julia's Chevy pulled into the lot. She got out and walked inside. Looked at me. Looked at the dark lights. Walked straight to the back hall without saying anything. I heard the breaker panel open. Heard her breath catch. She came back a minute later. Her face was pale. She looked at the front door, at the windows, at me. You pulled the beacon. Yeah. She nodded slowly, reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope, set it on the counter. That's your pay for tonight plus extra. Sage doesn't know about the extra and he won't. She pulled out a second item, a new laminated card. Same size as mine. The laminate was clearer. The text looked freshly printed. She set it next to the envelope. Same 5 rules. I print a new one every time someone pulls the beacon. Keeps it clear. I picked up the card. It was identical to the one in my pocket. You can quit, Julia said. I'm not going to pressure you either way. If you want to walk, walk. I'll cover tonight and we'll find someone else. I looked at the envelope, at the card, at Julia's tired gray eyes. I'll be back tonight, I said. She nodded. Okay. I drove home in daylight. The truck started on the first try, which made no sense because the starter was dead. I didn't question it. That afternoon, I used the cash from the envelope to pay for a new starter at the auto parts store on the north side of Ely. The guy installed it in the parking lot for an extra $20. Took him 15 minutes. I went back that night, 10 p.m., on time. Julia was waiting. She walked me through breaker 3, showed me how to reset it, told me the oven would run for exactly 47 minutes, starting at 1 a.m., and I was not supposed to touch it. I understood now. The job wasn't pumping gas or making sandwiches. It was holding the line. And if I walked away, the line moved somewhere else. Somewhere without rules. Somewhere without a beacon. I wasn't going to let that happen.